This year's budget is going to have far-reaching implications on your investments as you've never experienced in the past 10 years. The reimposition of the long-term capital gain tax can cost you more than you think. Is there a way out? Can we mitigate the impact? Well, we will talk about all these things in today's Investors Hangout, which is brought to you by Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Funds and Value Research. With me is the CEO of Value Research, Dhirendra Kumar. Dhirendra, welcome.
Thank you.
My name is Rajesh Lake, and my first question to Dhirendra is, you have been saying about the impact of the reimposed 10% capital gains will be much bigger. Yeah. How big?
It varies, but it will be bigger because one is that for all capital assets, what is normally the formula being taken is that your capital cost is always adjusted for the inflation. So if you buy something today, and you sell it 10 years later, the money would have become less worthy in the course of 10 years. So the cost cannot. So if you buy something for a lakh of rupees and sell it for 2 lakh rupees 10 years later, your cost is not taken as 1 lakh rupee. It is adjusted for the inflation, and then the difference between the sale price and that inflation adjusted cost price, the difference is on what you pay the taxes in case of this. So assuming that in a mutual fund your fund is growing by 12-13% and inflation is at 6%, so your real rate of return is just 6%, but you will be paying 10% of all the gains. So that is why I say that depending on the time frame, it could well be on a 10-15 year basis, you could well be paying 30-40% of your real gains. It is just not on the it's just not on the real gain, it is on all the gains, even the nominal gain. So you end up paying taxes on the inflation as well.
Okay. How about people have been talking about take out your funds and put it somewhere. What happens to the power of compounding in that case? Yes,
this is something which you have to be really careful about. Now you have to buy fund, invest in a fund with a long-term view, because the more often you change it, the more often you make changes, you will be liable for paying the capital gains tax. So if you invest in a fund, take it out after 1 year, whatever be the gain, you are liable to pay taxes. If that gain is just 1 lakh or below, then not, else you have to pay the taxes. So what happens is, as a result of this, your capital keeps coming down periodically. Okay. So if you invest in a fund and hold it for a very long period, you don't have to necessarily sell it. Then it's growing, and because every time, assuming you have a 50% gain, and 50% gain you realize it immediately becomes 45%. You are liable to pay that 10% capital gains tax. So from there on, only assuming, let me give you an example. Your 100 rupee grows to 150 rupee, and you take that money out. So you are liable to pay 5 rupee tax on the 50 rupee gain. Okay. So from there on, only 145 rupee will be at work. If you don't take it out, your full 150 rupee will be at work. So as a result of this, we did this exercise.
So this is the illustration that we are showing you, and Dhiren will just quickly take you through that illustration.
If anybody would have invested in an equity fund and would have earned the average return which an Indian equity fund has earned over the last 25 years, right, and made those changes every 5 years, you buy a fund, hold it for 5 years, make some change, okay, and again after 5 years, you make some change, and you earned an average of anywhere between 13 to 14%, which any equity fund has delivered. Your total capital, if there was a long-term capital gains tax of 10% of the format which we have right now, you will have 10% less money as a result of that. Okay. So the long-term implication on a 12 to 13. So these are just illustrative number. It will vary depending on how your fund does and what is the time frame, how often you change. But I'm giving a very long-term general illustration that for a 25-year holding period, for a 25-year investment, making changes every 5 years, the cost and earning anywhere between 12 to 13%, which an average Indian equity fund has delivered, you will have 10% less money as compared to now what was the prevailing regime that it was exempt from capital gains.
So that's very well explained by Dhirendra. What about switching funds a few times? We are talking about compounding. We are saying that we lose money if we switch too often. But what can you do when the fund is underperforming? I mean, you have, no say in the matter, and you have to kind of switch the fund.
No, if it is inevitable, if you think that, it's important to be in well-performing fund, but at the same time be conscious that you are not at liberty. Earlier there was no penalty for making those changes. If you invested in a fund, after 1 year you realize that it's not making sense, or it's not doing as well as you thought it to be, or it is just not matching to your expectation, you could have made the changes, and there was no tax liability. No longer. So be conscious of it, and by being conscious of it, making some choice where the fund has greater flexibility. You don't have to worry about it. It will take care of itself. The likelihood of a fund, so one is that you have to be careful. Be careful about your fund selection, because you might have to hold it. Holding it for many years is more profitable now. You don't have to make necessarily, change your investment depending on the timing. So you need to be really focused on long-term selection which works for you, and you don't have to change, and that should have been the approach even earlier. Right. But now there is a penalty. You will be liable for the long-term capital gains tax, so be careful of that. And there are some ways in which you can deal with it. One is that to the extent of 1 lakh rupee annual tax, long-term capital gains generated in a financial year will be tax exempt. So to that extent, harvest that capital gains, because assuming that you are earning, you are going to make 5 lakh rupee in 5 years time, and of that 5 lakh rupee, about 1 lakh of rupees comes every year. I'm just giving an example, it's a hypothetical example. If you are able to realize this 1 lakh rupees every year and invest it again, you are not liable to pay any taxes. But if you realize all the investments, all your gains after 5 years, your 5 lakh rupee will be the gain, 1 lakh rupee will be the exempt limit. So 4 lakh rupees, on that you will pay 10%. So you can save that 40%, 40,000 rupees 5 years later. If you are able to realize a part of the gain up to 1 lakh rupees every year, but beyond that, don't make changes.
Okay, that's a smart way of mitigating.
I would call it, the impact capital gains harvesting on an annual basis to the tune of 1 lakh of rupees.
You can't do it to all your investments, can you?
You should not do it to all your investment, but this also presents you an opportunity to make a nominal change to your investment which you think is not doing well. Okay. And even with all your investment, assuming that you have 10 lakh rupees invested and it has grown to 11 lakh rupees, realize that 1 lakh rupee and invest it again. Realize capital as well as the gain and invest it again, so that you are able to shelter your gains from the capital gains tax in future.
Okay.
And it will be a perfectly legitimate thing, because that is provided in the tax laws.
Now, what role will the fund manager play now? When it comes to mitigating the impact of.
No, fund manager has no role, because mutual fund as a tax vehicle, it is tax exempt. The fund manager has no role in this. The fund manager should do his job the way he has been doing, do it better. Because he should do it better. Of course, all fund managers should do better all the time, but fund manager has no say in all this, because fund as an investment vehicle remains tax sheltered. The fund manager never pays any taxes at his level. All the tax liability is for the investor, depending on his holding period.
Okay, but there's also no tax within the fund.
Yeah, so when a fund manager is buying and selling, there is absolutely no tax implication. All the tax implication is at the investor when he buys and sells his investments.
Okay, so we need to minimize the churn by not buying and selling frequently.
Yes.
Ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, and the second thing that you said, more time and effort intensive, and actually contrary to do less approach. That's the second thing that you mentioned. So these are two ways in which you can mitigate the impact of the LTCG impact. Okay, I've also heard that ULIPs, they're exempt.
Yeah. Yes, there is a different regulatory framework.
Should I rush to the ULIPs?
No, not really. They continue to remain. Most investors should not mix their insurance and investment for the same reason. It's a poor combination. You can't really, and the cost. opaqueness and all those things remains disadvantages. At the same time, the need for insurance should be dealt with. It's a very important goal to be adequately and fairly insured, and that need changes dramatically, which cannot be met by ULIP anyway. So ULIP as an investment vehicle is not a great vehicle given its expenses and the lack of competitiveness, or the way it is structured and designed, and lack of objectivity in terms of you evaluating how it is doing. So it remains a poor combination. Don't mix insurance and investment. That's why you should avoid ULIP.
For that, you have to have your term plan.
You must have your fund, your term plan. And mutual fund, despite this 10% capital gains tax, it remains the best vehicle to invest for the long term, because it provides you the diversification, it provides you the convenience. You can still do your SIP, you can still minimize your taxes with your SWP for your income needs. So all the conveniences, transparency, liquidity, diversification, great track record, efficient mechanism of buying and selling. So all those things actually make it and very intensely regulated. Okay. So all these things actually still makes it very attractive. It is little disadvantages. It's a small speed breaker that your returns will be reduced by 10%. Which was not the case in the past. We have just gotten used to not paying taxes.
So small 10% is what Dhiren is talking about. But a word of assurance, if you can give to our viewers at this point of time, it's not such a big deal. Relax. Do not.
Yeah, it does not really warrant any big change. Yes, you have to tactically change some few things. That don't invest in the dividend plan. But that is what we used to suggest anyway. Yeah. Be little. Careful with your investments, making investment, hold it for the long run. You have to, do some calculation in the month of March so that you are able to realize and do that capital gains harvesting every year, so that you are able to shelter a part of your gains completely from taxes. So these are 2-3 things which you should do. Of course, that actually adds to the complication. The capital gains harvesting bit, most investors will not be very comfortable doing it, because investors, generally tend to choose a fund, invest regularly, set up their SIP, maybe increase it sometimes. Once in a while, if they need the money, realize it, and now they'll have to worry a little bit about it. But it's important that your money grows. It is important that you are able to save with convenience, and on those fronts, I think mutual funds still remain the most compelling alternative for all individual investors.